I'm putting all mine live now. That one is now live. Facebook is going live.
Yep.
Right. Stream and record there. Okay. Right.
Good evening, all our viewers. We are back with chapter 3 of the book, Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration. I've got Dereck Tafuma, who will be going through the evaluation and ask me a couple of questions. So stay tuned. We are here for you. You can also type your questions and we'll try to address them. Thank you, our viewers. Dereck?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Elliot Pfebve. We are reviewing Elliot Pfebve's book, Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration. I've done something extraordinary today. I was just telling Elliot. So I'm live on Periscope, which is a Twitter application. I'm live on Facebook, and I'm live on YouTube Live. And we're discussing this book today. In fact, we're looking at chapter 3. We've looked at chapter 1 and chapter 2. In chapter 1, Elliot was setting the scene of where Zimbabwe is as we speak, or was at the time the story was unfolding. And so in chapter 2, we then looked at his childhood growing up. The book is entitled Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration, Articles of Defiance. And there was a lot of defiance in that, in chapter 2, which started from an early childhood. But there's also defiance in chapter 3. So there's defiance everywhere. And in chapter 3, you talk about the formation of the MDC, your meeting with President Morgan Tsvangirai of the MDC,
Indeed,
your
yes.
subsequent deployment to go and organize the structures in March Central. And then one very outstanding act of defiance in that chapter is Sergeant Langwan.
Yes.
So I just want to hear that story from the horse's mouth.
Yes.
The rest, I think the readers, they can read and find out.
Indeed, yeah.
Yes. Can you tell us about Sergeant Langwan?
Yeah, I think some of our viewers who remember, because it was widely publicized in Zimbabwe, an event where a Sergeant Michael Langwan, based at Mukumbura border post, was manhandled by his superiors after being seen wearing an MDC t-shirt. He was off duty by the shopping center. Actually, what happened is it was some of our outreach programs. So we'd gone to Mukumbura with a team of MDC provincial executives and district executives. When we arrived at Mukumbura border post, we saw a lot of people, as usual, on a weekend enjoying themselves. Among them, there were also some police officers off duty, CIOs, teachers, and so forth. And we started preaching the gospel of MDC. And these were early formation of the party. Those days, people didn't know, they've never heard of MDC. So whenever you see people, you do any groupings of people, the first thing you do is to market the party and to explain what MDC's philosophy was in terms of what it stands for, its leadership, etc. And Sergeant Michael Langwan, was very much interested to hear more, and we explained, and eventually said he wanted a t-shirt. And those days, we're not selling the T-shirts. We're just giving them for free. So firstly, he wanted a card, and we gave him a card. The next thing is he said, I want a T-shirt. And we thought that he was going to wear the T-shirt thereafter, maybe when he went back home. But he was a very courageous police officer who straight away took the T-shirt, and he wore the T-shirt on top of his civilian cloth. And the surprise of his other police officers who were looking, and the CIOs, of course, they didn't take it lightly. And the next thing, what we saw was that they started conducting, sort of phoning the member in charge, reporting this police officer by the name Michael Lambert. And even though after about 30 minutes or so, the member in charge came and challenged him to remove the regalia, MDC regalia, Michael Langwan refused. He was actually in defiance. And the next thing is thereafter, it became embroidered with the support unit, the CID,
member,
police, member in charge himself, and the man handled him, arrested him. And but he was in defiant mode. I liked the stance that he was doing, because he kept on saying that it was his right to choose a political party of his choice. And he was actually also saying, look, you, the member in charge, you have been seen at ZANU-PF meetings, and you have been wearing ZANU-PF regalia. And why is it that that's a hypocrisy? It is worse. Why is it that I am not allowed to choose a political party of my choice? So after that, he was arrested, taken to the police station, and he was incarcerated there. But then, yes, I was the person who has given him the T-shirt, and the next thing he said, hang on, we have to stand behind our supporters. And we drove to the police station, and we demanded why he was arrested. Again, the member in charge explained that police officers were not supposed to be associated with any political party, including any regalia for that matter. And I demanded to see Michael Langwan, and surprisingly, they allowed me to see him. He was in a cell. And what he did was, can I have the form from the member in charge? I need to resign now. I cannot work for an oppressive regime. And he said, look, given a choice to choose between serving for Mugabe as a master and serving MDC, an opposition party, to champion the cause of the people, I am choosing MDC and I'm resigning. So I told that to the member in charge, and member in charge said, well, we have to notify his superiors. And then eventually he was granted his wish to resign, but not before he was transferred from Kumbura to Rushinga to Chikurubi maximum prison, where he was incarcerated for about 6 weeks. Then he was released after that and discharged because he had resigned from the force. And true to his promise, Michael Langwan became a cadet of MDC, became part of the vehicle of change. In terms of mobilizing in Marshall Central, he was again attached on various fronts in terms of also protecting the leadership of the party. And until 2002, I then lost a connection with Michael Langwan. And if Michael Langwan is listening, or somebody who knows Michael Langwan out there, please let us know. We need to celebrate such bravery, our heroes. He became the first police officer to challenge the government. He became the first police officer to wear the MDC regalia. And I think during that time, to such an extent that most local papers actually published the story. So it was widely publicized throughout the country. So he is a hero well known within the circles of MDC and the leadership. And I think this is why in this book I said he deserved a mention and an acknowledgement.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, so if you are just joining us now, we are discussing Elliot Pfebve's book, Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration, Articles of Defiance. This is chapter 3 we're talking about today. And he's just been narrating a very interesting story of Sergeant Michael Langwani, who decided to put on an MDC t-shirt in the early days of the MDC when they were still trying to get to be known by the people. And so he was arrested and he offered to resign from the force and was granted his wish. Can you tell us about the mood at the time? Because I think ZANU-PF was not really taking the MDC seriously at the time. And maybe for that reason, that gave people the courage. Because I remember I was working in the rural areas at the time.
Yeah.
And people were openly talking about the MDC.
Yes.
Then after the referendum and the no vote, in which the no vote was a success for the opposition, things suddenly changed as the war veterans became more aggressive. In fact, they started becoming aggressive. Before that, they were very quiet.
Indeed.
But they became very aggressive to the extent that those people who were talking about the opposition prior to the referendum had to keep their mouth shut after the referendum because it became a very dangerous thing to talk about the opposition. So
Indeed,
can you tell us about, do you think that the mood at the time when ZANU-PF was not taking the MDC seriously, do you think that could have contributed to the show of courage by Sergeant Langwani?
Indeed, in a way, yes. But I have to admit he's a very courageous man. And that was not the only incident. And I think some of the incidents, we'll talk about them later on in other chapters. But as far back as September 1999, from ZANU-PF perspective, they didn't see MDC being a threat at all. Here was a new political party with no structure. And it was not known out there in the rural areas. And when there was only 6 months left for the general election in 2000. And as far as ZANU-PF is concerned, they didn't see any threat whatsoever. After the People's Convention in September 1999, when then MDC was formed as a pressure group, the initial objective was not necessarily to turn MDC into a political party, but as a pressure group to pressurize the government to deal with corruption, accountability, and governance issues, and the economic meltdown, which has already started happening that time. However, the government was very dismissive of any voice other than its own, to such an extent that Mugabe then proclaimed on TV that, and he challenged us to the ballot to say, well, if you want to join politics, don't hide behind the pressure group. If you want to join politics, then let's meet at the ballot box. And I think that's and then after that, there were subsequent meetings within MDC as a pressure group, and the decision was made to transform MDC into a political party and challenge ZANU-PF and Robert Mugabe. So yes, those early days, it was easy even to penetrate in the rural areas, and most of the structures that are currently in place were possible those from 1999 to 2000, those ZANU-PF, including the war veterans, they had no strategy to stop us or to stop MDC as an opposition party then, because they didn't see any threat coming from MDC. So yes, and then after that we will move into various campaigns towards the June 24, 25 June elections, to which I was a member of parliament candidate for Binura. And MDC, true to the challenge that Mugabe pronounced, we came very close to taking power 6 months after formation. Out of 120 seats in parliament, MDC won 57 seats. ZANU-PF 63 seats. 6 seats short of taking power 6 months before the election.
Yeah.
So you can see the dynamics. But again, look at it. We had a brand. I can see. I always look at these various political parties mushrooming in Zimbabwe, and to say, okay, what are the chances that they can be as strong as MDC?
Yeah.
With a strong backbone, hardened enough to withstand military handling. We had a brand, and Morgan Tsvangirai was a brand. And I think he might have here and there, like he's a human being. There might be a few faults here and there, like another person, right? In any organization.
Can I just to disturb you there, it's to do with Morgan. In your book, there's a part where you talk about the fact that at one point, because of his history in the trade union, he was more popular. He was known more than the newly formed party.
Indeed.
So when people were joining, they were not joining the MDC, but they were joining Morgan.
Oh yes. I mean, I was in charge of March Central. I knew the challenges. After meeting with Morgan Tsvangirai, he said, "We are allocating you March Central.
Mm-hmm.
So you are going to set up structures." Okay, there were no structures whatsoever. Not only structures, people there have never heard of the MDC. And who would blame them? It was a new party which started predominantly in town, predominantly in Harare. But yes, so during the outreach program, when we were selling the brand of MDC, people didn't know what MDC was. And it became so difficult to explain to people from a police point of view. But then we discovered that it was easier if you say, do you know Morgan Tsvangirai? And everybody, even in rural areas, they will say, yes. This one from ZCTU, who clashed with Mugabe. This one who was beaten by the CIO. Because at one point they targeted Morgan Tsvangirai, and he was left almost dead in his office, and he was rescued by the secretary. But instead of that incident, cowering Morgan Tsvangirai, it actually strengthened him, and it made him very popular. So it was easy to sell Morgan Tsvangirai as a brand of MDC. And it was not surprising that in 2000, February 2000, when we had the first Congress, initially the president of MDC was Gibson's band. But then it was unanimously agreed. I think even Gibson's band was aware and agreed that we needed a very strong character to deal with Robert Mugabe. And it was unanimously agreed that Morgan Tsvangirai was the person with that charisma and who could bring that charismatic approach to deal with Mugabe head on. So this is why we had a brand, and it was building from his experience as the Secretary General from ZCT, and also the bruising incident that he had with the government and Robert Mugabe. So that became a sort of a solid ground as a springboard of MDC.
Okay, I think I'll ask you the last question because we don't want to talk too much about what's in here, but you also talk about campaigning for the no vote.
Yes.
What was that like?
Yeah, it's quite, I've told other people who probably...
Can you tell us what it was? What was the referendum about? And then the actual campaign?
What happened is initially there was the NCA. So before...
The National Constitutional Assembly.
Yeah, the National Constitutional Assembly, that was before even MDC. And the chairman for NCA was Morgan Tsvangirai. And its mandate was to pressurize the government to come up with a homegrown constitution. By then, I think we had about 16 amendments of the old constitution, of the Smith Constitution. So we were still using the colonial constitution with a lot of pages. So wanted a homegrown constitution that actually limit the powers of the president and give an innovative approach of maximum of 2 terms.
Yeah.
And so, yes, and the ZANU-PF realized that, a lot of people were for the change for that constitution. And they decided to bring in Jonathan Moyo to come up with their own parallel constitution.
Mm.
And this is where Jonathan Moyo came to the fold of politics in Zimbabwe. So he became the spokesperson of the constitutional framework.
He was called.
It was parallel to NCA.
Was he called from South Africa where he was working?
Yes, he was called from South Africa. So then what then happened is that the government called in for a referendum of their constitution draft constitution that they had actually produced through Jonathan Moyo.
Mm.
And there were a lot of clauses in there that actually sort of amplified the powers of the president, which were totally out of sync with the demands of the people as People's Convention when NCA was formed. And also when MDC was formed in September 1999. So eventually what happened is that MDC and NCA, and including also ZCTU, we all came together to campaign against a no vote. So a yes vote would mean that ZANU-PF's constitution, which was tailored to suit their own governance approach, continuing suppressing the wills of the people, would have prevailed. So we campaigned for a no vote, and the no vote won. And that was in February, and became the start of violence in Zimbabwe. Now, for the first time, we also saw that the farmers supported the no vote. And Mugabe was able now to sort of twist it from a race card. So that out there he was portraying as if he's not fighting a new political party, MDC, but is fighting imperialism. And it became this chorus of discord where ZANU-PF day in, day out channeling propaganda to say that MDC is a white party, is actually sponsored by the West. But mind you, when MDC was formed, even the farmers didn't support MDC. They were actually suspicious of a government that was backed by the ZCTU, by the workers, because it means their workers would become more powerful than the employers.
Mm.
The farmers only started supporting MDC on the basis of the new constitution tailored by Jonathan Moore, because within that clause there was also powers to seize land without compensation.
Yeah.
And MDC was the first to come up with a concrete land policy in which we said we will audit the land, and we want evidence and critical analysis of who owns what. Yes, we are aware that 5,000 white farmers owned 2/3 of Zimbabwe country federal land, which was not acceptable. And MDC was the first political party to say land distribution was an unfinished agenda.
Yeah.
But we wanted to do it in a sober, strategic planning process that wouldn't destroy the agriculture as an economic drive for our prosperity. But ZANU-PF wouldn't allow that. They wanted a quick fix.
Yeah.
They wanted a quick fix. And not only that, but at the end of the day, what we saw, I think all our viewers would accept and would agree with me that we saw a shambolic invasion, grabbing, violence, to such an extent that today we have the very people like Robert Mugabe owning 13 farms, ministers owning 5 farms, 6 farms. That's not what we fought for. And that's not what is in the Constitution. And that is not even what was in the Jonathan Moore's Constitution. And the current situation, what we have is now 5,000 whites owned 2/3 of the country's prime land. Now what we have is about 2,500 ZANU-PF leadership owning 2/3 of the prime land. So the current situation is worse. And what we have, we've just changed the scheme, but the problem of land remains. And I, for one, will not support any government whatsoever that would get into power and pretend that business is as usual without addressing the issue of land.
Yeah.
The issue of land does not need to be sorted out on a partisan basis.
For those joining us now, we are discussing Zimbabwe, My Home, My Frustration, book by Elliot Pfebve, Articles of Defiance. In this case, he's talking about the defiance in chapter 3 of one Sergeant Langwani, who challenged his fellow officers and joined the MDC and put on the MDC shirt. His argument was that some police officers are ZANU-PF members, so there's no reason why he cannot be a ZANU-PF member. And now Elliot was just discussing and talking about the question of the no vote for the referendum, in which the no vote came victorious, and the land issue then became even more problematic after that. And I think we've been talking for about 28 minutes now. So Elliot, would you like to sum up chapter 3 without giving away too much? Because obviously we're not selling the book here on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. We're live on all 3 platforms. But we're saying, here's the book. We're discussing chapter by chapter. We're now in chapter 3, and Elliot will just give a brief summary without giving away too much. It's available on Amazon for those who want to buy it.
Yeah, in summary, chapter 3 sort of explores the formation of MDC in September 1999 after the People's Convention. It also looks at various challenges in terms of resources, in terms of infrastructure of the country, to set up structures and also make MDC as a political party known to various corners of the country. I also covered the challenges of police officers who wanted to join MDC, who eventually, some of them like Michael Langwan, ended up Chikulubi maximum prison for just supporting the part, a new dispensation. We also, in the same chapter, there's also leading to the no vote, the referendum of February 2000, in which for the first time ZANU-PF was defeated and Mugabe accepted the defeat. But we thought that having been defeated, he would actually go with the will of the people. But instead, he unleashed violence, which culminated in also invasion of farms to what we now know as a shambolic land resettlement. People like Robert Mugabe owning more than 13 farms. And again, within the same chapter, we said the problem of land remains. And this is why up to date, MDC remain adamant that a solution to land redistribution is land audit, so that we know who owns what. And it must be distributed to the people of Zimbabwe, irrespective of their political affiliation. And I think that remains the policy of MDC and for foreseeable future. So again, that is covered in chapter 3. And also, finally, within chapter 3, we look at the elections, first elections of June 24, 25, in which MDC won convincingly 57 seats of 120, and then ZANU-PF 63, only 6 seats short of taking power 6 months after its formation. So yes, in short, that is the summary of chapter 3, but there's quite a lot of defiance embedded in chapter 3 and subsequent chapters to come.
Okay, thank you very much, Elliot Pfebve. Next Sunday, we're going to look at chapter 4. I will be live again on Facebook. Thank you, Facebook. Thank you to those who are watching. Butle Simon, Musa, Canisius, George, William, Maggie, Henford, there was Bernard, Modi, and Kuziva. Thank you, guys. Thank you for those who are watching on Twitter. Thank you to those who are watching on YouTube. And we're going to, we're recording this Skype. I was speaking on Skype. So we've been recording the Skype interview, in which case Elliot is going to post on his YouTube channel.
Yes.
So thank you for watching once again. We've come to the end of the discussion.